Okay, so let's make some slab test tiles. This is a real quick, easy way to make some test tiles. Your test tiles do not need to be beautiful. They just need to have a surface that's similar to the work that you are making. So if you're making something that has a bunch of like carvings, or you're using a lot of underglaze or some sort of combination like that, then your test tiles should have that as well. You notice while I'm rolling out this slab, I think it's always important to remind you to flip your slab frequently, unless you have some sort of surface that is magically super non-stick. Mine is not. Mine has a glossy surface, so my clay loves to stick to it. If you are not flipping it over frequently, you're just going to get it stuck to the surface. So anyways, our test tiles, we want to make sure that our test tiles have as much information as we can about the surfaces that you're using. So I'm going to have one side of my surface be nice and smooth. So we'll smooth all of this business out. And then the other side of my surface, I'm going to texture with like a stamp. You can texture it with whatever you want. So again, if you're doing like carvings and stuff, do it with that. If you are doing it by adding slip or doing some sort of slip trailing, by all means, do that. But like honestly, you should have some texture on it, so that way you can tell what the glaze does while it's breaking. So I'm just going to cut out a little rectangle here, so that I can have my surface to work with. I'm looking for something that's going to be about like maybe 2 inches tall, and it only needs to be about 1 inch wide. I don't want to make something so big that it won't fit into my my test glaze containers. So, keep that in mind. Bigger is not necessarily better. So I'm just using a little like wooden stamp. You can honestly stamp it with whatever. But what I would say is that you want to make sure that it's consistent for all of your pieces. So one whole face of my piece is going to have a textured side, and the other side is going to have nothing. Just be smooth, because I want to make sure. So when I test my glazes, I'm going to be testing both 1 dip and 2 dips. So I want to have enough room to actually be able to see what like that texture, both thin and thick, with thin and thick glazes on it. So now I'm just going to do some measuring, because I don't know why. I just need to cut the side, because I was like thinking about whether or not I want to make it like super pretty, and then I remembered that I don't care, and it doesn't really matter. Again, the thing that I think is most important is does it have the texture, and is it consistent between your test tiles? Because if you have a test tile that's completely different than another test tile, you're not really able to see what the differences are between these different glazes. Like how is that glaze acting differently than another glaze if your surface isn't the same? So we're trying to make something consistent along those lines. So pick your design. Think about what are the surfaces that you are interested in testing. If you're making a ton of plates, then you should make some horizontal test tiles. But for the most part, I recommend that you make vertical test tiles, so that way you can see how that glaze is running down the piece and how it flows over that. Sometimes the other thing that people will do is that they will make it so that they're going to glaze both a flat surface and a raised surface. But I'm just this is what I'm using to make the base of my piece. Just using that ruler makes it so that I don't have to like warp the entire clay. It would probably be helpful if I waited just a little bit of time to cut this. So notice I switched over. Before I was using my needle tool to cut, but now I'm using my X-Acto knife because I don't want to squish things around. So needle tool is a great way to cut like a wet slab, but X-Acto knife is going to give you a super clean edge, which is what I'm going for right now. So you can see the first one stood up just fine. My second one is a little bit floppy, which again, if you let this set up a little bit more, it would work a little bit better. I think one of the downfalls with this particular technique of making test tiles is that sometimes people aren't very careful about how it's weighted. So then your test tiles don't stand. We will not fire your test tiles if they don't stand. So do check that. And I'll just come back and check this when it's just a little bit stiffer to make sure that they all stand. But meanwhile, I'll have it sit down at an angle. And I don't want it to be a perfect L, guys. I want it to kind of bend back a little bit. Otherwise it does, but I don't want it to bend too far back because then it falls over. So we're looking for a happy medium. Basically, like if you can see my tile on the furthest left, it's like that middle, the top part of it kind of sits in the middle of the base. I don't know if that makes sense, but go figure out some balance, guys. As long as your test tile stands, then it's all good. It's also kind of helpful to have a little bit of runoff room too. So, all right, guys, go make some test tiles.